afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. It is Saturday, July 13th, and you know what that means. It is time for the High Risk Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, acknowledging our new tribal chief, Jeremy Pierce. Welcome, one and all. You know, you can check out the socials, Charismatic Creations on Facebook and YouTube, Charismatic_Creations52 on Instagram, and of course the 215 on Twitter. In today's show, we're going to look at the downsides of the WWE Draft. For all the good that it does, I think it does a lot worse, and we're going to talk about that today. But for now, you know what's next, so just go on and hit my music. So when it comes to the draft, the one thing that should always be beneficial to the roster is refreshing the mid-card scene. And right here we have the 5 people who needs a mid-card championship run. And we start with number 5, Braun Breaker. Now, he's the very obvious one along with someone else who's also on his list, but Braun's time is coming. I am figuring he'll probably end up defeating Sami Zayn for the Intercontinental Championship at SummerSlam, and Sami Zayn has done a great job, and Gunther have done excellent jobs elevating that championship. And the role with Braun is on. It'll almost be like Gunther has the belt again, because Gunther was dominant, and I think Braun will be dominant. He'll elevate the championship even more than it is now, so when he ultimately gets defeated for it, it'll be special. Same thing with number 4, LA Knight. Everybody and their mother expects LA Knight to become U.S. champion. Everybody and their mother thought LA Knight would be facing Logan Paul one-on-one at WrestleMania, but it ended up being a triple threat match. But they're facing each other again at SummerSlam, and we're expecting LA Knight to win. He has not held a championship since coming to the main roster. Yes, he faced Roman Reigns, and that was capitalizing on the immense popularity that he has. But it's time to get some gold around that man's waist. And we move on to number 3, Mi Chen. I am a big Mia Yim fan, aka Mi Chen, and she has suffered loss after loss after loss. She lost to NXT. She keeps losing on the main roster, and the easiest way to reinvigorate that, fix her, championship run. And that's the thing, though. The main roster does not have a mid-card championship for the women. NXT does. They have the Women's North American Championship, which is currently held by Kalani Jordan. And if you're not going to put the championship on Mia Yim and NXT, then that means you've got to create a title for the main roster. And it's kind of absurd at this point that the women don't have a mid-card title. Each brand doesn't even need to have their own specific title. Actually, you know what? I'll take that back. They should. Because then you can get more matches on the pay-per-view card. But Mi Chen has to get a title somewhere along the way. Same thing with number 2, Jada Parker. I would say outside of Roxanne Perez and Soroka, Jada Parker might be the most popular woman in NXT. There are a few others that kind of dip in and out, kind of like Lola Vice, but Jada Parker is on a roll, and her star is growing. She needs that championship. I understand that Kalani Jordan is holding her right now, and she was a very good pick to become the inaugural champion, but Jada Parker cannot be denied, and you might have to hurry up and put this title on her. Number 1, Chad Gable. This man has lost and lost and lost, and something's got to give. Now, I do believe that the Alpha Academy won't be joining him again, but I do believe the Creed Brothers and Ivy now will be joining him, and that will ultimately be when Chad gets the championship. He needs one, and the hard part is, if I believe they're putting the title on Braun, how does Chad fit into that? Because he's got to deal with the Wyatt Six. But Chad has been excellent on the main roster. He needs something to solidify that. We'll be right back. The spotlight is on once again, and this time it is shining on one Ilja Dragunov. Now, I don't want to say his tenure so far on the main roster has been a mixed bag, because it hasn't. But at some point, something's gotta give. He is a phenomenal talent. We've seen him go with the very best in Sheamus and Gunther for sure, with that legendary rivalry. And he's going to be a big player on the main roster, but I feel like you have to pull the trigger on him soon. And I think that really starts with a really, really good feud with Braun Breaker, reigniting that from NXT. The main roster needs a tough guy because Gunther is going to be in the main event picture, and there needs to be challengers, worthy challengers for Gunther at some point. And who better than Ilja Dragunov? Because we are clearly waiting to have them to fight each other. What has to happen? Just that. You have to give Ilja that spotlight. Put him in position to succeed once the likes of Sheamus and others fall back. We'll be right back. The WWE Draft is important. When the Invasion angle ended and the WWE owned ECW and WCW, they did the WWE Draft, having a brand split, with the first draft taking place in 2002. And since then, there have been 18 drafts. And essentially, it makes a roster for Raw, SmackDown, and at one point, ECW, and then another point NXT. And it was just outgoing for those last two brands. And there is a benefit to the draft, and I'm all here for it. I don't want mixed rosters ever again. The roster is too big to have the same people show up on multiple shows. It cannot happen. Okay. And there are benefits to the draft, and that includes starting new feuds. After you think the time is up, and like, hey, we gotta split this up. Let's get some new blood here. Having fresh starts with people that are just kind of lost. You know what I mean? That happens from time to time. Then you have splitting up tag teams. There are times where tag teams are just done. You're ready to make someone into a star, and you gotta see if they sink or if they swim, and that's okay. That's a good benefit of the draft. And lastly, you have new title challengers, right? You have this way of saying, hey, we need a new opponent for this person, because we've now have this rule that, champions can't change brands, and that's great. Remember what happened with Becky and Charlotte? That can't happen ever again. So there are many benefits to the draft, right? But for me, the way that they do the draft, there are far more downsides than benefits. And we'll start with breaking up tag teams. At almost every draft, a tag team is broken up. And it's just at the behest of Vince McMahon, right? The tag team in question are usually good. Now, it's different if it's a tag team where there are just two single stars that have been thrown together, kind of like a lot of tag teams. But when you break up someone, a group like the New Day, just because you want to push Big E, you break up the APA because you want to push Bradshaw, you break up the Hardys because you want to push Jeff Hardy. How does that work out? Because usually when they break up a tag team, someone gets left behind. It almost always happens, and we can go far as back as when we really saw the first tag team split, and that was Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Shawn Michaels went on to become, Shawn Michaels, and Marty Jannetty stayed Marty Jannetty. You know what I mean? So you don't have to rush into breaking up a tag team unless you've exhausted all options for them. Prime example, I think it's fine that they broke up the Usos. Even though Jimmy is hurt, he has found a kind of a niche as a comedic character. And as for Jay, he's now main event Jay Uso. He's fighting for world titles. That worked. But if you break up a tag team, you have to make sure you push both equally. I remember when they broke up the Hardy Boys. Clearly, everybody and their mother expected Jeff Hardy to be the star. Jeff Hardy went on to be the star, but if you look at their respective careers overall as singles competitors, Matt Hardy has had the better career. And that was outside of the WWE. Whereas Jeff did go on to become a multiple-time world champion in the WWE, but Jeff Hardy is going to be Jeff Hardy. We saw what happened with Los Guerreros. We saw what happened with the APA, even though, remember, Farouk was wrestling a long time before Bradshaw. So that's really understandable. But breaking up, I'll give you a prime example. What was the point of breaking up the Dudley Boys? It did not work out for either one of them. Bubba just ended up in a tag team with Spike, and Devon wanted to become Reverend Devon, and the best thing that came out of that gimmick was we got Batista. So every time the draft happens, we are expecting a team to break up. And every draft so far, I am expecting the Street Profits to be broken up. I am expecting the New Day to be broken up. I just do. So you don't have to split these teams up unless there is a fallback plan. Now you can take people from a faction and keep a tag team there. That I wouldn't really be opposed to. But then you have people not getting used. That happens far too often. So right now, there have been releases, right? And some of the time, it's because people aren't getting used. So at the most recent WWE releases, we're excluding contract expiring, right? But Boa got drafted, was never used. Dijak got drafted, was never used. Cameron Grimes wasn't used. Von Wagner, Veer, Sangha, Jinder, Xia Li, Zion Quinn weren't getting used. Odyssey Jones is literally on the main roster. He got drafted 2 years ago. He has not shown up on TV. Do not draft people if you're not going to use them. For the longest time, when they got called up, Alba Fire and Isla Dawn were just not on TV. And now they're tag team champions. Piper Niven went from being not on TV to fighting for a world title. And guess what? She's not going to be on TV again. She's just going to be here. Do not call up people if you're not going to use them. Apollo Crews was wrestling on WrestleMania, lost the championship, and then disappeared. Then went to NXT and was cool and could have stayed at NXT, and they got called up to the main roster again and is barely being used. It's gotten to the point where they sent people down to NXT just so they could use them. The Good Brothers are wrestling in NXT right now. Why? When the main roster could use tag teams. Where in the blue hell is Omos? Don't draft people if you're not going to use them. Because then it leads to releases. It leads to people sitting, catering, collecting a check. And yes, there are people that are fine with just collecting a check. And then you have people that are injured that eventually when they come back, someone else is not going to use. Like, look at the women's division. Currently out right now in the women's division, Alexa Bliss, Carmella, Charlotte Flair, Julia, Raquel Rodriguez, Shotzi, Stephanie Vaquer, Tamina, Valhalla. Tamina has not been on TV at all. Now, Valhalla, Alexa Bliss, and Carmella are all on maternity leave, all right? But what happens when they come back? We know what happens when Charlotte Flair comes back. She's just going to end up in the main event picture, meaning someone else is not going to use. And then you have two high-profile signings in Julia and Stephanie Vaquer, and you have to use them. Do not call up people if you're not going to use them. It is that simple. Period. And a gripe that I really have is that the draft happens way too often. The first draft was in 2002. It is now 2024. There have been 18 drafts. And at one point in 2019, there were 2 drafts. Why? Now, you say a draft happens every year in sports. Yes, that's different. Wrestling is weekly storytelling, and you can't use the whole roster for all the stories you want to tell within 1 year. So for me personally, the draft should happen every 2 years, and that forces you to get better with your storytelling. That's it. Just get better with your storytelling. Okay? Like, we just had a draft this year. Cody Rhodes needs to face more challengers. And that leads me to my next point. You're not using all of the challengers. So I'm going to continue using Cody Rhodes as an example. These two go hand in hand. The draft happening too often and not enough challengers. Cody Rhodes, since the draft, has defended the championship against AJ Styles twice and Logan Paul. And the other 2 times there's been an event, he's either not been on the card or he's been in a tag match. Now, one, the WWE are not putting on enough matches on these pay-per-views. That's already annoying me. But when the draft happens again, do you think Cody's going to have gone through all of the potential challengers he could have had? Same thing goes for Damian Priest and to a lesser extent Gunther, because come on, we know Gunther's probably winning the championship soon. But can you use all of the challengers, especially when it comes to the mid-card championships? Like, I need a blood feud for these championships. We had something great with Sammy, Gunther, and Gable for the Intercontinental Championship, but what about the United States Championship? Nothing really until right now with Logan Paul and LA Knight. I can dig that. Women's division: Bayley, Liv, challengers. And the tag team division: when have we gotten the last great tag team feud? Just think about that. I can't count Sammy and KO versus the Usos. That's part of a bigger storyline. When was the last time on the main roster we had 2 teams going blood for blood? I think the last great tag team feud we had was the Usos and the New Day. So we've got to figure that out. No, we had the Usos and I'm sorry, not the Usos. We had the New Day and Imperium, but there weren't any championships on the line. So if you're going to keep doing the draft every year, you got to figure out something better. If you go to every 2 years, you can stretch storylines a little bit and make new stars, which is our next point. By having a draft every year, you're not taking the time to develop new stars. If we look right now at let's look at the SmackDown women's roster. Right, Bayley is your women's champion. She's already defended the championship against Chelsea Green, I believe, and Piper Niven. That's it. This is your prime opportunity to elevate Chelsea Green, to elevate Piper Niven. Naomi's Naomi. Tegan Knox has just not been on TV. Period. And Tiffany Stratton is Miss Money in the Bank. She's a given. She was already going to get the push, but what about Candice LeRae? What about Blair Davenport? Let's look at the Raw men's division. Sorry, I feel like you have to put Odyssey Jones on TV. Raw has a lot of horses. Raw has Dexter Lumis, Braun Breaker, Braun Strowman, Bronson Reed, the Creed brothers, Damian Priest, Drew McIntyre, Gunther, Odyssey Jones, who's not getting used, Sheamus. They have horses, and I think that Odyssey Jones would be a perfect fit. This is like your time, your moment to build some new stars. Odyssey Jones is perfect. Dragon Lee, you need someone to become the new face of Lucha Libre in the WWE once Rey Mysterio is done. You're clearly not doing it with Santos Escobar, and Dragon Lee is sitting right there. Prime opportunity to make stars. Tyler Bate is out. Pete Dunne needs to go on a bruiserweight run. But what are you doing? If you're not going to use this moment to make new stars, to build up your future, because you're clearly doing the NXT, you've got to do it on the main roster. And I already talked about the tag division usually suffering. We already talked about that. And here's my biggest issue. And I feel like it might not happen nowadays, but I miss co-branded pay-per-views. I do. Now, they're probably not going to do it again because for some reason, these idiots couldn't figure out how to run a co-branded event, how to make them work by spacing them out. Personally, what you should have done is you can keep your 12 events, right? You have 12 events. No, you have 13 events. Watch this. You have your big five, right? You have Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, Money in the Bank, SummerSlam, Survivor Series. Those are your 5 co-branded events. Now, you run your Raw specific pay-per-view and your SmackDown specific pay-per-view on back-to-back weekends. So if you run, let's say this month, right? Raw would have an event next Saturday on the 20th, right? You run Raw's Bad Blood. The following Saturday, right? You run SmackDown's No Mercy. So you go week after week. So 20th, and then after the 20th, not the 27th, but the 3rd on August, you run the event. And then once they have their back-to-back pay-per-views, you run your 2 events, and then the next event is your big events. So, like right now, Raw and SmackDown will run their brand-specific pay-per-views, and then the next event would be SummerSlam, right? And what this does is, it leads back to our point of stretching out storylines, getting more people used, and you can still run your 6 pay-per-view card, your 7 pay-per-view card, but you get more people time to shine. Like right now, let's say Raw had an event this weekend. I'm just spitballing here, right? So you'd have your world title, your IC title, your tag team title, your women's title on the line. So that's 4 belts right there. And let's just say you throw in the women's tag team championship. So that's 5. So now you have 2 to 3 other storylines that can get put on this pay-per-view. You could just have a match, say, hey, number one contenders match. And then you do that with SmackDown. There's nothing special about running co-branded events anymore unless they're the big ones. Because now you're running these small events and it just sucks. And you don't even have to run giant arenas for the brand specific pay-per-views. 5,000 seat arena, you'll sell out, period. And it'll still look great on TV. It's not hard. You fix these things, you fix these issues in your draft, your roster, your company will be successful. That I can guarantee. Period. Let me know what you guys think. This is something that's been on my mind for a very, very long time. And I would love to discuss it more with you all. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Coming up, we got a couple lists next week. The top women and men of the year so far. We already had the tag teams and the factions. We got Flashback Fridays. We got our Slammiversary preview. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming up for you. And check out the socials. Charismatic Creations on Facebook and YouTube. Charismatic_Creations52 on Instagram. And of course, the 215 on Twitter. And it's always Bailey, Isla Dawn, GD Dillon, Chris Statlander, Willow Nightingale, and Anna J. Holla at you, boy. Peace.